Apparently, when last we reported on one of these big shows, what was it? Was it SummerSlam? When did Randy Orton beat Drew McIntyre for the title?
I don't think it was SummerSlam. It may have been one of the makeshift ones in between, but I don't remember. Was it Hell in a Cell?
It was Hell in a Cell. Randy Orton beat Drew McIntyre for the title. Drew McIntyre has already won it back. So what the?
Just this past week on TV, apparently.
Yes, he lost it and won it right back. And now he's going to face Roman Reigns. Both these guys look incredible. Roman Reigns, especially now, as he's, dropped the shirt and the whole 9 yards, but Roman Reigns and Drew McIntyre both look incredible. Visually, and in the way that this was built and the package that it was given and Heyman's along and, the way that they're treated on television, except for AJ Styles, Seth Rollins, and Bobby Lashley, really, these guys were the first stars on this show. I mean, and yes, I know they've done things with Owens and blah, 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 but I'm just talking about the whole package. Right now, momentum, look, presentation, the way that they've been booked, very few stars, as you said. And this was the first really main event fucking match. This was the first thing that I could see on this show that Vince McMahon would have been happy to have on the Survivor Series in the 90s. He would have, that era of Vince McMahon would have kind of been ticked off at everything he got up until now on this program, to me. That's just my fucking thought, but anyway, once again, it's two guys with the fucking belt. You can't be the man when there's two men, and it's each guy has a fucking belt here, and they've gone nuts with the fake crowd noise at this point in the show. It's distracting. But both these guys can go. They work this like a main event. They haven't made Drew McIntyre dominant. He beats Brock Lesnar, and then, as we mentioned, he drops it to Orton and wins it back a week later, whatever the fuck. But he's really stepped up as a talent, and we've talked about him being penalized more with the no fans than anybody because of the incredible push, the beating Lesnar, all the shit they've given would have really been enhanced with crowds. But McIntyre can go for a guy that size, and he can sell. And he's a baby face because the other guy's a fucking heel because he got Alfred Hitchcock as his fucking manager. There's somebody to cheer for and somebody to cheer against. That it's two grown adult men that not only look like athletes but can work and have been presented as main event stars. And they took their time to start this out because everybody had already done everything else and started it like a contest. It's nice to see referee Rudy Charles. Anyway, they had a serious wrestling match that actually made sense. Got some heat on McIntyre. He made a big comeback. They panned the fake fans. Did you see this on more than one occasion?
Yeah.
I don't think you need to pan the fake fans in the fucking little boxes. That doesn't have the same thing as same impact as panning real people. That spine buster, by the way, McIntyre had a spine buster and kind of like a little float over jackknife. Once they kicked it in, this was really good. They started going back and forth with false finishes. I like the McIntyre foiled Reigns' spear and went into a double wrist lock. But I wrote at this point, does Paul Heyman ever interfere in a match? Ever? Is he the first manager ever to not interfere in any of his matches?
Remember, he's not a manager, he's an advocate.
Okay, but he's fucking out there.
He doesn't do anything. He
doesn't take a bump. He doesn't do anything offensive. He doesn't even pass gimmicks or forward objects. He knows how to do this shit. He's been doing it for years or did it years ago. It has to be a directive that he never get involved in any way. But why would you make that directive? That would be, I'm not saying he has to. Number one, look at the fucking state of him, as they say over in the kingdom. Look at the size of him. I don't expect him to take bumps like he did fucking years ago. I still could. I could take all the same bumps that I did. I would just hurt myself every time I landed. But he couldn't, just do anything sometimes because it would have impact because it's not overdone. He never does it.
He's like a heel Arnold Skoland.
Yeah.
He manages guys who don't need his interference, so he just stands there and watches. Brock Lesnar, Roman Reigns. He's the heel Arnold Skoland.
But can you imagine how much heat it would have gotten if Brock Lesnar had ever been in one position one time against somebody where Heyman needed to grab Brock's leg and put it over the fucking bottom rope to save him? That could have been a little fucking out for the fucking Undertaker before they ended his streak. Anyway, so they were really kicking it in here, and I felt bad because they had obviously that Samoan drop onto the desk, the announce desk spot. They had it planned where it would blow just completely into pieces, and it didn't break. So Reigns had to do it again. I would have slowed down and not just gone back to the exact same move again to break it on purpose. But they did. And then Reigns speared him through the barricade, got a 2 count. Apparently they don't have holy shit on the soundboard, but they have this is awesome. Because no, whether it's awesome or not, those people are not there. You are recording and playing this is awesome, and that's not the same thing. And it's distracting to people rather than. But anyway, McIntyre kept kicking out of those false finishes. Then somebody's going to say, well, he hates it when they do that on AEW. He always talks about, well, and they gave him a double arm DDT on the ramp. These were false finishes that were presented as something and meant something, but weren't presented as something that should kill a motherfucker. Yes, he speared this giant 6'6", 270-pound guy through a fucking barricade. Then he had to crawl into the goddamn ring or get him into the ring, and then 1-2, he kicked out, and then they sold in between everything. They made sense. Reigns was hitting him with his Superman punch or his spear, whatever the fuck. And as I said, McIntyre sells well for a big guy, not only facially, but with his body language. But then I don't know how I felt about the finish. Finally, McIntyre comes out of nowhere, hits the Claymore kick to Reigns, and Reigns flies into the referee, and Rudy almost wiped his nose off his face on the bottom rope going to the floor, poor fella. And then here comes Jey Uso, who's been blistered by Roman Reigns earlier and made to feel horrible because he lost. And he distracts Drew quickly to get nailed, and then Reigns nut shots McIntyre. Uso hits super kick. Reigns hits Superman punch and gets the front face lock, and the second referee comes in and calls McIntyre out. Whether I don't know whether he tapped or he just passed out, but called it.
I think he passed out.
I think you're right. It probably would have been better if Eddie Graham was overseeing this. I don't know how I felt about the whole thing because it was maybe a little much for McIntyre to kick out of all of that at the end, and it took everything in the goddamn world to beat him. It could have been a little bit simpler than the fucking, I don't know. What do you think?
It was a good match.
It got a little busy, I guess. I'm sorry.
It was a good match, and obviously Uso getting involved tied into earlier in the show where he had disappointed Roman Reigns. But I think I said to you several months ago that I think Drew McIntyre is a great look. I think he's really good in the ring. I think he's a good promo. I think he comes across like a star. You haven't beat Lesnar. You put the belt on him. I wouldn't beat him for any reason for a long time because there are no fans there. So you really got to just keep establishing that he's the guy. So when the fans finally come back, he has that aura. He has that mystique. He's the guy who hasn't lost that whole time. Since that time, he lost to Randy Orton, got the belt back, and then he lost here. And I get that they're probably setting it up for a bigger match down the road with these two guys. However, I think it's stupid. I think it's not good booking to beat him again. They've beaten him twice in the last couple months or 3 months, whatever it was.
Well, and some people are going to say, well, but, Roman Reigns, well, the thing is, if you I agree. Right now, Roman Reigns should not be beaten either. So that's why you don't book the match. You just don't book this particular match.
This is a potential WrestleMania main event.
But for it in a year and a half from now, when there will be people. Imagine if they had 2.5 years of neither one of these guys. Drew McIntyre's been undefeated, and Roman Reigns, he had enough cachet beforehand where he might could do a screwy thing or two and it still wouldn't hurt it, but they would never have had a match. And you could build that for a couple of years and have a dream contest when you needed to put people in a stadium again without just giving it to them now. And we'll just do the Dusty finish and lead to which is the Eddie Graham finish, which is the Dory Funk Sr. finish, which is probably a goddamn Cowboy what was his goddamn name? Not Cowboy Luttrell, he was in Florida, but fucking Cal Farley. Probably a Cal Farley finish from the 40s. I don't know. Not the greatest finish I ever saw.
And you know what? This is going to be very unpopular, but I don't care. It hasn't been done in a while. I can't think of the last one I've seen. Someone will say, it was last week. I can't think of it off the top of my head. But there's nothing wrong every now and again, to the point where you can't remember the last time it happened, with doing a double disqualification or a double countout or something, especially if there's no fans there to boo. There's nothing wrong with doing that if you have these two guys that are matched up down the road, and both guys don't need to lose right now.
I can see where people go, and that would be unpopular, and I also know you don't care. But in a case of something getting out of hand, a match getting out of hand, and people having to come a big pull apart, and people used to love that when they didn't give a fuck about the finish. They knew they were going to see a rematch, so they didn't care that it was a double DQ when there was fucking blood flying and people getting in the way and trying to fucking separate them, and there's chaos and pandemonium. The old wrestling days. You can't create that kind of chaos anymore. They don't know how to, at least. So it just makes the double DQs just kind of flat like everything else is these days. But I digress. I agree there, but everybody's going to complain about something, just like we are.